Greetings, friends and enemies. There's a lot of questions around using a mini PC for running Home Assistant and how to do so using Proxmox as a hypervisor. So I decided to put together this video to give a general idea on how this is done. As you can see, I have a brand new Beelink mini PC here. This is the S13 model, which is basically a newer version of the S12. It uses the N150 instead of the older N100. Performance-wise, it's about the same. This one has dual 2.5 gig Ethernet, which is nice, but not really relevant to this project. It comes with a little bracket to mount to the back of a monitor using a VESA mount if you've got an unused one there. It also comes with a HDMI cable and of course its power adapter. This procedure should work more or less the same with other mini PCs or other devices. However, the exact procedure may vary slightly, so you may have to adjust if you're using something different. For this demonstration, I will also be using the Jet KVM to access the system via a web browser. There's not really any difference between doing it this way or using a monitor and keyboard directly attached to the system. This just makes it easier for recording and also for booting the boot media, which we'll get to in a moment. So booting the system for the first time, we hit delete to enter the BIOS menu. This can be largely left to defaults on Beelink systems. They do have an impressive array of options though, so if you need to change anything, please feel free to do so as required. The only thing I'm going to adjust is the time and also change the AC power loss auto restart, meaning in the event of a power failure, the system will power on straight away once power is restored. In this BIOS, it's done by changing state after G3 to S0 state. At this point, you'll want to insert your Proxmox virtual environment installer boot media. I'll be uploading the ISO to the Jet KVM and booting it using its system. But for the majority of you, I suspect you will need to prepare USB boot media. Explaining that is beyond the scope of this video. So if you need to go and check how to do that, then pause and come back once you have it prepared. Once the media is mounted or inserted on a USB media, then you should save and reboot the BIOS. Then once it's booting, you press F7 this time, and this will open the boot menu and allow you to boot from selected media instead of booting the pre-installed OS that comes with the Beelink system or whatever system you're using. The first option on the Proxmox boot menu will be what you want in most cases. Read and agree to the EULA. We only have one target drive in this case, but if you have more than one, then select as needed. Set your time zone settings. Set a password and email address. Set a hostname and static IP address that works with your network settings. This will be different from what I have here. Confirm that everything looks good and press install. As the system reboots after you install, you will want to unmount or remove your installation boot media. Proxmox will boot its default boot menu option, which again should be fine in most cases. Once booted, you will see that it directs you to a URL to access the web UI, which is how we will do the rest of the configuration. Once we access the URL, we log in with the username root and the password that was set during the installation. We can see that the system is now up and running, and we can switch to the shell. Now we want to look at the Proxmox helper scripts to make life easier. Firstly, we want the Proxmox virtual environment post-install script. You want to be sure to get the virtual environment script and not one of the others by mistake. Copy and paste the given command into the Proxmox shell and follow the on-screen instructions. It's likely that the defaults here are fine, but adjust if you need something different for your setup. Once the script completes, you will want to reboot as it states. Once the system is rebooted, you can refresh the web UI. You can ensure that everything is up to date, although this should have been taken care of by the script unless you changed its settings. Now it's time to get Home Assistant OS set up. So we go back to the Proxmox helper script site and find the Home Assistant OS virtual machine script. Be sure to get the right one, as there's a few others that do different things. As before, copy the command and paste it into the Proxmox shell, then follow the on-screen instructions. Again, as before, the defaults should be fine here. Once the script has finished running, you'll see that a virtual machine has appeared on the left-hand side of the screen. You can double-click on this to bring up the VM's shell. Here you can see it go through its first boot. Once it gets through and gets to the Home Assistant CLI, it will show you a URL which will direct you to the Home Assistant installation. As you can see here, I'm using the IP address, which can also be found on the CLI output, and the default port. This is instead of using the MDNS URL, as I find this to be more reliable. Once you access the Home Assistant web UI for the first time, you'll see that it's preparing for setup. This can take a few minutes. Once it's done, you'll be able to configure and install Home Assistant as with any other type of install. Now for some extra fine-tuning. If you want to increase the resources of your virtual machine, then return to the Proxmox web UI, shut down the virtual machine, then we can make some changes in the hardware section. Here we are changing the RAM allocated from the default of 4 gig to 8 gig. You can adjust this differently depending on your plan setup for your system. The storage of the default drive is 32 gig. So here we're selecting the disk and using the disk resize action to increase it by 68 gig. This gives a total of 100 gig. Home Assistant operating system will automatically adjust the partitions during boot to expand to use the additional storage. This is a one-way operation. Also here, I've increased the CPU core count from 2 to 4 so we can make use of the entire system. You can now restart the virtual machine, and then once it's up, refresh its web UI. Now we're going to set up pass-through to allow you to connect the Wi-Fi adapter and Bluetooth adapter from the mini PC directly to the virtual machine. This means they can only be used by that virtual machine. So we shut down the system, then switch to the Proxmox system shell and type lspci. Look for the Wi-Fi adapter. You can see here that it's PCIe device 00143. Then we go to the virtual machine's hardware section where we add a PCIe device and ensure that the correct device is added by checking its code here 00143. Once this is added, it's the turn of the Bluetooth adapter, which is on the USB controller. So we switch back to the system shell, this time type ls USB and look for the Bluetooth adapter. Here we can see it's USB device 80870026. Now, much the same as the PCI device, we add a USB device in the hardware settings of the virtual machine and select the correct device. You can now restart the virtual machine and Home Assistant OS will have access to the Wi-Fi adapter and Bluetooth adapter if you need these for your system. Hopefully now you have Home Assistant running under the Proxmox hypervisor and your system is ready to go. I hope this guide has been somewhat useful to you in your setup and quest for a new Home Assistant system.